guys, Ash here coming at you today talking about Royal Giant domination in Clash Royale. Now, after the update, because of the extended range, Royal Giants have seen a huge uptick in usage, and it's rightfully so. Today, we're going to show you two decks and how to use them. One with legendaries, one without. I've heard you guys loud and clear. A lot of you guys want variations of decks you can use without having legendary cards, so this is a really effective deck, and I'm going to prove it to you guys in today's episode. You have the Royal Giant, you have the Mini P.E.K.K.A, you have the Zap spell, which I absolutely love. I think the Zap card might be my favorite card in the entire game, as lame as that sounds. Moving along, we have arrows, Tesla to distract and give us some defensive power. We have Spear Goblins, air targeting unit. We have Minions, air targeting unit, and we have the Valkyrie. Moving over to the first battle deck, this is the variation I've been enjoying with the legendary cards in it. I've swapped the Inferno Tower in there for the Hidden Tesla. We have the Ice Wizard and the Princess, as well as the Fire Spirits here. They're only level 6, so I probably shouldn't be using them in Legendary Arena at where I am right now, but I'm still having success with them, and I'm going to show you a couple replays highlighting that towards the end of the episode. First, I'm going to start with a couple replays. Now, this is working way up at 3,800 cups in the game. Man U's using them, so he's using this Royal Giant deck, which I showed you guys right off the bat, the first deck without the legendaries. So let's see how he uses the Royal Giant, because that's really going to be the theme of today's episode. Not just that the Royal Giant is super dominant, it's why the Royal Giant is super dominant and how you can use him to win matches and maybe take advantage of people who haven't caught up with the time, so to speak, and haven't learned how to properly use or defend against him. So at this point in the match, this is something very funny here. It's a stalemate, and you actually see a decent amount of these, especially the higher you go up in trophies. I think there's a lot more on the line. People don't necessarily like their starting hand for mounting an offense. For example, Dan the Man here up in the top there, he didn't have his Hog card ready. He's forced to play a cannon, and you can see the Royal Giant right away illustrating why he's so useful in the game right now, because that extended range allows him to target any defensive unit except for obviously the Mortar and the Expo, but cannons, certainly he can target Inferno towers without being in bomb towers, without being in range of their projectiles or their beam in the case of the Inferno tower. So wow, this is really a big change, a very big change for the Royal Giant. Not only that, but he can also target the crown towers from a farther, safer distance behind. And there's a certain way that you're going to want to use your Royal Giant. Unlike the regular Giant and the Golem and those big hefty cards like the P.E.K.K.A or Sparky, you don't want to use him behind your crown tower. You want to place him right at the line. That's what that's going to do is, A, it's going to force your opponent to react really quickly, and B, if they don't react, he's going to get a few hits on that tower. And that really brings me to the win condition of this deck. The win condition of this deck more often than not is going to be a 1 tower to nothing win. And most of that damage is going to be done by your Royal Giant off those 3 or 4 or 5 hits at a time you can get on those crown towers. In the meanwhile, you have a lot of defensive options here. You have obviously Mini P.E.K.K.A. In a bind, you can even drop your Royal Giant defensively if you need to. He's going to distract the units, and similar to a Giant, he has a lot of hit points. It can buy you some time to regain some elixir and mount a better defense on your own. For example here, I should mention, by the way, that Man U has been switching between Fireball and Arrows. The next replay will show the Arrow variation instead of the Fireball. So this defensive Royal Giant is now turning into an offensive Royal Giant. You can distract him with a cannon, but it's not going to distract him for long. His cannon is super powered, and he still manages to get a hit on that tower, even with the Barbarians and the cannon both digging away into his hit points. So what was I talking about that the deck is built around the Royal Giant? I said that earlier, didn't get a chance to expound upon that point. And that is because all these cards, whether it's the Valkyrie, the Mini P.E.K.K.A, the Spear Goblins, or the Minions, are going to serve a purpose to combo with your Royal Giant when you play him. Now, what type of card you play along with your Royal Giant at the halfway mark on the map, that's going to depend on how your opponent reacts. So for example, if they play a Valkyrie, for example, or a Knight or something like that, you can play your mini P.E.K.K.A. If they play a Skeleton army or some Goblins, for example, you can play your Valkyrie if you have her up, obviously. The Valkyrie's going to protect the Royal Giant, the mini P.E.K.K.A. is going to protect the Royal Giant. What you want to do is protect your Royal Giant. If they play something like a Minions, you can counter that with Minions yourself. If they play an Ice Wizard or something like that, or Barbarians, you can also use the Valkyrie. So the whole idea behind this deck is you're going to be chipping away at one of the towers. At the same time, you're going to be comboing that Royal Giant card with one of your other cards based on what the defender is using. Alright, so let's hop into the next replay here. Now, Man U, this time, has swapped out that hidden Tesla for an Inferno Tower. Now, the Inferno Tower, obviously way more effective against P.E.K.K.A. and power decks, P.E.K.K.A, Golem, etc., etc., and the hidden Tesla is a little bit better against these Hog Cycle-type decks. So it really depends on what you're running into. As with all decks around your trophy level, sometimes the meta gameplay and the strategy changes depending on what arena you're in. So it's up to you to maybe adjust a card or two in your deck, but the strategy premise is still the same regardless of what arena you're in. So again here, you can see the opponent made a little mistake here. I'm not sure if he knew actually if he had the Royal Giant in his deck, but the Royal Giant again is perfect at sniping the elixir collectors that are put a little bit too high. And the same thing goes obviously, like I mentioned earlier, for the Inferno Towers. The Royal Giant can take out an Inferno Tower and that beam will not target that Royal Giant from his range as long as you keep him at max range. Honestly, guys, it's kind of funny to me how this one little change can so dramatically increase the viability and strength of a unit. The range on the Royal Giant has been increased, and now he's everywhere. All of my clanmates are using him. I'm using him. I've completely changed my deck. I mean, obviously, the new cards are great, and I'm sure we're going to find a lot of great uses for all the new cards, but honestly, just this Royal Giant is dominating our gameplay right now. So that's what we're playing a lot of. I'm going to show you after this replay. I'm going to show you me play in the legendary deck. I'm at around 3,500 cups, so not quite as much as Man U is, but you'll see how both variations can certainly be very successful. So now it's Valkyrie on Valkyrie Crime. I think our Valkyrie is going down. We're going to go ahead and reload, but you can see this is what I'm talking about, chipping away on that tower. That left tower is about 2/3 health right now. It's going to send a mini P.E.K.K.A. Mini P.E.K.K.A. is pretty good in this deck, because mini P.E.K.K.A. can turn into a fast offensive weapon if you need one, if the match dictates it. Now notice how Man U almost always, unless he's really making an offensive push, he always keeps close to 10 elixir. That's actually by design. That's because he needs to combo the Royal Giant. You can put the Royal Giant by himself. Certainly, he's very effective by himself, but the idea is to keep him standing as long as possible, because even 3 or 4 or 5 hits will do a significant amount of damage to that crown tower, and this deck is built to defend. You can really counter any card between the mini P.E.K.K.A., the Minions, Spear Goblins, and the Valkyrie. You can counter any sort of offensive push, especially in conjunction with the Inferno Tower, and you have the Fireball if need be. You have so many defensive weapons that it really allows you to be patient and rely on that Royal Giant just doing a little bit of damage at a time to that crown tower, and then you can see another victory for Man U. Alright guys, and now I'm going to show you my deck with the legendary cards. So let's go ahead and hop into one of the replays here. Actually, you know what? We should probably review my deck again before we get into the replays, just so you guys can see it. Like I said, I probably shouldn't be using the Fire Spirits at this point, but hey, level 6. I'm just trying to have fun with the new cards, to be honest with you, but they do have some functionality in this deck. Here's my battle log. You can see a couple losses, a few wins. This is when I started using this variation of the deck here. So overall, doing very well, up about 200 cups or so using this deck. So these are the type of decks I'm going against. Obviously, you can see a few other Royal Giant decks scattered in there. Let me just show you probably the most recent replay here against a cycle deck, and we'll see how I handled this deck. So it's a fast-moving deck that I'm up against, and you'll just see how I can play defensively. I even make a few misplays if I remember this battle correctly, and I'm still able to compensate for those and still have a fairly convincing victory. So I'm going to go ahead and start this match using my Princess behind my Crown Tower, kind of of just seeing how they react, and that's an okay trade, 3 for 4. Sure, he got a few hit points off my tower, but I know I have the elixir advantage at this point. I'm going to go ahead and play some skeletons, just hoping I can get to my Royal Giant in time, but I was very late there, and you'll see I actually make one of my first mistakes coming up in just a second here. There's a Valkyrie on me defensively. I'm going to combo with the minions, try to get that Valkyrie down ASAP. They do get the Valkyrie down. The Royal Giant only gets one shot off on that tower. So I was a little bit late defending against this hog. Unlike Manu, I was a little bit too aggressive out the gate, and then I was too aggressive there defending. So those are where my mistakes thankfully pretty much end. I shouldn't have played those little skeleton card. It was only a 1 elixir loss there, but still, you know, that's what the game's all about, right? Maintaining and capitalizing on those elixir advantages when you do have them, not wasting it with one skeleton like that. Right away when I did that, I was like, ah, crap, I knew I shouldn't have done that. That was silly. So at this point, I can see that the Royal Giant is my next card, so I want to combo, again, the Royal Giant. Basically, whenever the Royal Giant is up, you want to go ahead and use him, you know, sooner rather than later, so you can get some hit points off that tower. This time, I get the Royal Giant in there on time, but he has a pretty good counter. He has the Valkyrie again, then he uses a Zap spell, really trying to take down my offensive push here. I do get another shot on that tower, but, you know, not too big of a deal here. And this is where a lot of people can kind of run into issues with this deck, right? Because you can't be too aggressive here. You can see he's barely touched my towers, except for that one hog that got through a couple hits on that right tower, and I barely touch his towers, but that doesn't mean you can rush things. You stick with the game plan. Even though he has 2 elixir collectors on the board right now, I'm still playing it cool here. This time I'm gonna go right at the center mark on the map. I'm gonna place down the Frost Wizard, place down the Royal Giant. This time the Royal Giant, he was a little bit slow on that cannon. My Royal Giant was able to get a few hits on that tower. Obviously, he's using the Zap spell very, very tactfully there. What he's doing is using the Zap spell after he places the cannon to make the Royal Giant retarget. If you guys didn't know that, I'm sure most of you do, but the Zap spell will also, upon doing damage and stunning the target, it will also make a target retarget to the next closest target. Wow, I just said target like 15 times. Okay, now I'm ready to re-up this Inferno tower here, kind of just playing it cool right now. I have a Frost Wizard to help back up that Inferno tower. That's going to go ahead and stop his little hog rush here. He uses a fireball, probably an ill-advised fireball, as it would not change what ended up happening with that hog there. You can probably just chalk down his loss here to that fireball because it leaves him low on elixir. I drop my Royal Giant, of course. Royal Giant targets the tower, and boom, tower is down, and that's the name of the game, guys. That's why you drop that Royal Giant at the halfway mark rather than way in the back more often than not. So guys, we're going to go ahead and end this episode here. Thanks for hanging out with me all the way to the end. You must be true fans. Thank you so much, guys, and as always, take care.
We don't play for fame, we don't play for cash. We just play for the glory and the crash of the ash.